Welcome to July statewide call of the California Alliance for Clean Energy. We'll get started as we have a full agenda. My name is John Smigelski. I'm a member of the steering committee. Our vision is the California Alliance for Clean Energy envisions a community-based and democratized energy system which promotes affordable, resilient, local renewable energy resources, prioritizing low-income communities that have historically suffered inequitable access to essentials such as affordable energy and healthy community. It is our usual practice to record these calls. We only publish the presentation portion of the call, not the Q&A portion, which will follow the presentation. So thank you for joining us this month. Our topic is Solar Roundup, what's happening in the courts and our communities. We have 4 speakers today. The first speakers are steering committees members who will introduce themselves, and I will introduce our guest speaker, Cailey Underhill. First up is Loretta Lynch, who clearly needs no introduction.
Thank you, John. And Takara, why don't we go ahead and hit the slides? In addition to being a general rabble-rouser and former PUC president, am also a lawyer, and that's really my core identity. So this issue that I'm talking about in terms of the legal appeal is really near and dear to my heart. As you all know, 3 environmental groups took an appeal from the PUC's 2022 NEM decision that made solar installations fall off of a cliff in 2023. The Supreme Court last year granted review of that NEM decision and granted review of 3 questions. One is, what is the standard of review that applies to the courts looking at a PUC decision when the PUC is interpreting what the Public Utilities Code requires it to do? And this is a monumental threshold issue that the court has not considered in years. And in fact, the court hasn't really squarely addressed this question since the statutes were changed in 1998, where the legislature told the courts, hey, courts, you need to review the PUC just like you do any other public agency. And the appellate court below did not do that. The appellate court below reached back to pre-1998 cases and applied a uniquely deferential standard of review in looking at what the PUC did in its 2022 NEM decision. And that deferential standard of review basically said, if the PUC gets to interpret the law, what the law means, and then we'll decide whether or not the PUC followed its interpretation of the law, which is frankly just no longer good law if it ever really was that deferential. So I'm very excited that the court is considering this first question, which is, what are the courts supposed to do when they're reviewing the PUC? And are they, the courts, supposed to read the law, decide what it says, and then decide whether the PUC followed it, or are they supposed to give deference to the PUC? And most of the oral argument, we'll talk about that in a minute, was focused on this question. What is the court supposed to do when it's looking at what the PUC did below when the PUC is interpreting a statute? But the California Supreme Court went further and said, we're going to also look at the substance. Did the PUC proceed in the manner required by law in this particular Public Utilities Code section, and also when it adopted the successor NEM tariff in its decision? So let's move to the next slide, Takira. But these are phenomenal questions and really groundbreaking questions when it comes to solar. So what the petitioners did, who are the 3 environmental groups, EWG, Protect Our Communities Foundation, and CBD, did when they took this appeal was focus on what the statute says. Imagine that. And the statute is all about what is the eligible customer generator and its generation facilities, and that the PUC is supposed to do exactly what it says here in the statute, which is develop a tariff for eligible customer generators who have generation facilities. So the great thing is the statute itself recognizes that solar is a generation facility. It is not just for only the customer's use. It generates, as we all know, electricity for everybody's use. And most importantly, in developing that tariff, the commission shall make sure that customer-sided renewable distributed generation continues to grow sustainably. And also that tariff must include specific alternatives designed for growth among residential customers in disadvantaged communities. You'll also note that the commission was supposed to base the tariff for the customer generators on the costs and benefits of the generation facility. Doesn't mention the utilities anywhere in this. And then also that the total benefits of that tariff to all customers and the system are approximately equal to the total costs. That's what the statute says. That's what the petitioners emphasized. Could we go to the next slide, please? However, that's not what the PUC emphasized. And this is the fundamental substantive issue that's in front of the California Supreme Court right now, which is, does the statute require a focus on the customer generators and their distribution facilities? And did the tariff that the PUC create enable that distributed generation to grow sustainably, including growing in disadvantaged communities, or did the tariff comply with the statute by focusing on what it actually focused on, which is the costs and benefits to the utilities and the utility system? So that's the key issue, key substantive issue. Are we focused on the utilities and their costs and their customers? Are we focused on customer generators and their costs and also their benefits? And are we growing? Did the PUC grow customer-based generation sustainably overall, as well as in disadvantaged communities? And you'll notice in the statute, there's not one hint of cost shift. In fact, the bill that created this statute originally included language about cost shifts, and that language was removed. So all of these red herrings about cost shift are not in front of the court, despite the fact that the PUC and the utilities are trying to put it in front of the court. So what's exciting here is the court held oral argument on June 4th. They've got 90 days to issue a decision. They can extend that for certain reasons, but most likely that decision is going to issue by September, if not before. And that means that the court could well kick it back to the appellate court and say, hey, appellate court, you used the wrong standard. Or they could actually decide under the correct standard themselves whether or not the PUC's tariff from their 2022 decision followed the law. And I'm very hopeful. PCF is the Protect Our Communities Foundation. And I'm just answering a question in the chat. I'm very hopeful that the court is going to say, yeah, the appellate court used the wrong standard. We're not going to defer to the PUC. We know how to read statutes. In fact, several justices asked the PUC, hey, isn't that kind of our job to read statutes? Don't we have special competence in that? And yes, they do. And that's what they're supposed to do. And so then the only question is, will they then send it to the appellate court to say, hey, read the statute independently and decide whether or not the PUC followed the law? Or will the Supreme Court just go ahead and take that second step themselves and decide whether or not the PUC's tariff followed the law? But just know that one way or the other, it may well be by Labor Day that the PUC's 2022 decision is vacated and we'll start again. And I just want to follow that up with, if we start again, Takira, if I could have the last slide. We really need to be looking at affordability because the statute very clearly talks about customers in disadvantaged communities. And this actually is a little old. It's last year's numbers. And it shows that even for care customers in the private utilities, their rates are higher than the most expensive muni utilities in LADWP in Sacramento, the most expensive average rate. So the rate that everybody pays blended is a lot less in LADWP and Sacramento territory than the rates that even the discounted rates that care customers pay in the rest of the state. And this graph shows the real problem for low-income communities throughout California, which is utility costs are just too much and we've got to do something about it. So Takira, I'm done with my slides. I'm going to hand it over to Bill Powers, who is the founder of the Protect Our Communities Foundation. who is going to be talking about exciting opportunities for public power and expanding local solar in San Diego.
Thank you, Loretta, for that signal and for a fine presentation. And Bill Powers, Power Systems Renewable Energy Engineer based in San Diego. I became an energy activist as a result of the 2000-2001 energy crisis here in California and all the shenanigans that I could see happening during that time. And since then, I've spent a lot of time as an expert witness in PUC proceedings like the one that Loretta was just addressing. So I'm going to talk about public power and local solar in San Diego. And this first slide shows a major driver for us, which is cost. And the lower left is the rate of rise of the residential rates in San Diego. Historically, we've led all the IOUs in having the highest rates, competitive now with PG&E. But the solid green is where we've been, and the dashed green is where we're headed. And you can see we're on a rapid rise of rates here. And so on the right is the cover sheet of a municipalization study done as a result of a failed finance or a franchise agreement negotiation here in San Diego. Our 50-year agreement ended in 2021. Community was really motivated. It looked like we might have enough council members to get a really good agreement that had easy off-ramps to public power. And it all came crashing down at the last minute. And one of the bones thrown to the community was yet another municipalization study, the third in 6 years. So we have studied this ad nauseum and have a good idea of what the benefits would be. Next. And so in the wake of that failure, several of the activists, including me and some colleagues like lower left, we just decided, you know, the rates are the highest in the state. SDG&E is relentlessly attacking rooftop solar. We have a big election coming in November 2024. Let's just go for it. Let's just pool our money, pool our friends, and float a ballot initiative to get public power in San Diego. And so this is us at a farmer's market. In the middle is bringing boxes of signatures. We gathered over 30,000 signatures to the registrar. We forced our city council to take an up or down vote on public power, which did not happen, but was a major momentum builder in the community. And that segued into Public Power San Diego, which is a 501c3 project that's trying to continue to till the soil and prep us so that we're ready to go and win it in the near future. Next. And San Diego Gas and Electric and parent company Sempra Energy just keep pitching us beach balls to hit to make this happen. And this is out of their February 2027 report on their 5-year plan. And it's explaining to shareholders and potential investors, we are doubling down on transmission and distribution. That's the sweet spot. Higher value, lower risk. And so what we end up fighting in these fights to preserve rooftop solar is we're fighting against the flip, which is spending all this money on transmission and distribution, much of which, in my opinion, we do not need. Next. So I'm going to concentrate on the left-hand bar chart, and this is holding company Sempra's 5-year plan capital spending for San Diego Gas and Electric and for Southern California Gas. They own both, and the royal blue is San Diego Gas and Electric. And when you tally up those numbers, it's a plan to spend approximately $13 billion over 5 years on essentially transmission and distribution, new T&D. SDG&E is a relatively small utility. It only has 1.4 to 1.5 million customers. That is $10,000 per customer, approximately, in new T&D in 5 years. I mean, that is the kind of spending binge that our electric utility is proposing, and gives us, as we try and build the power here for a public option, this is the information that we use to make that case. Next. So, how would it work if we pulled this off? And I'll give you a 30-second 101. This is just the grid. Upper left is a remote generating plant, voltage increased, high voltage, long line transmission through the countryside to get to the demand center. And this oval, imagine San Diego inside this dashed red oval where the homes and businesses and industry is. That imported electricity comes to a transmission and distribution substation at the edge of town. That's what that little gold yellow box is. And voltage is dropped and then distributed to users. And what we are proposing is that we would become an electric distribution utility, that we would own and operate this low voltage distribution system. The transmission and distribution substations, there are about 20, would become toll booths. What we pull in over those lines, we pay all the transmission charges, the exit fees, everything else. But what we develop on the low voltage distribution system is our business. We don't pay transmission charges, utility transmission charges. We don't pay exit fees. And as a result, we can actually develop rooftop solar and storage to save money compared to the alternative, which is pulling in power from the utility and the grid. So that's the plan. And just a final, next. Just in pictures, we want the upper left photo. We want to cover our city with solar, and we want storage with each one of those sites, as opposed to what's here in the lower center, which is what I would call the IOU, or now the CCA status quo. Huge remote solar and wind farms brought in over high voltage transmission. And we do it for economic reasons, which is to the right. That red rising curve is lower cost remote utility scale solar coupled with ever rising transmission delivery charges versus the green declining curve, which is commercial solar on the distribution system in the city, declining in cost over time without any transmission charges. Next. And just another important aspect here in the San Diego area that we're fighting to protect is, this was a picture I took a year ago on the Pacific Crest Trail, less than an hour from my home, in beautiful mountains of San Diego County, which are under tremendous pressure for wind farms, for solar farms. And what do we give up in addition to paying too much money for transmission? We give up that. And so I wanted to end on this. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Genaro Bugarin to tell us about updates on community solar.
Thank you, Bill. Takira, can you see my screen? Am I sharing the right screen?
Yes, I can. Looks good.
Okay, so that's good segue. So my name is Genaro Bugarin. I'm a director at the Energy Coalition. I've been here for 13 years, and we're a nonprofit. I also serve in the steering committee here at CACE. But as a nonprofit, all our mission is to empower and transition communities into a clean energy future. And so one of the things that we do is we do programs and demonstration projects to show how that future is at reach and possible. And so today I'm going to speak to this specific grant out of the California Energy Commission. And it is very aligned with what Bill just described, which is how do we avoid those transmission costs. And so briefly on the grant itself, it is a $9 million grant from the CEC. The project is located in East LA County, serving specifically and by intention all a disadvantaged community and low-income customers. So all of the strategies that we put in place have been with the intent of showing how we can serve the low-income households. So community solar in California has not really been, a thing, right? We've struggled as a state to get it up and running. There is no market for community solar. Which is unfortunate because other states have done much better than California. So even though we think that we are the leader, in this case, we are not. So community solar is going to be, in this case, in front of the meter and not necessarily directly serving the load of that facility or that site. I'll speak high level here to this slide. So 2019, 2 specific programs were created in addition to what was existing. In 2022, there was a process evaluation that really did not show that things were working as they expected. A new proceeding led by AB 2316 created, sort of a revamping of community solar in California. A decision was created in 2024. We are still waiting for this community renewable energy program that is supposed to come out in some time. That decision, was postponed into 2016. There's a new bill, AB 1260, that is looking to do better to come with a legislative arm to this process, right? And what this shows here is the challenges from the policy side, and community solar is a policy-driven type of programmatic approach to front of the meter solar, and it shows a policy not working. It shows the CPUC not being successful in establishing and creating a community solar program. So the visual just shows that in this world of community solar, we're creating 100% renewable clean electricity to renters, to homeowners that do not have a suitable roof, to someone who is not able to have doesn't have the access to finance or to get solar in their own roof. And so it does bring equity into the rooftop transition and clean energy transition. So what did we do? So I'll highlight that the program that I'll speak to is the community sponsored solar, or the community solar green tariff, that actually was closed by AB 2316 when the decision in 2024 came out. Nonetheless, our project did go through as a community sponsored solar. And I think it shows and it demonstrates that if we have the will and we have the resources, we can put it together and we can be successful. So how this began was with community engagement. So we partnered with an activist, GV San Gabriel Valley, is a nonprofit CBO. The school district in the area, this is unincorporated LA County, was our sponsor and supporter, as well as our local supervisor in LA County. We had even through the pandemic, we had an active process of engaging with people, allowing them to get, to understand what this option was for them. Here's a picture of the site and how it's located. We were served. So the design of this program is that it's local to the community. It serves by the community itself within 5 miles, and it is sort of driven by community, right? This is a picture of the project. The thing that I'll highlight is that it is relatively small, right? So together it's under a megawatt, and it is 2 different sites. This is going to be important because a lot of the complaints or pushback can be, well, there's not enough big rooftop warehouses where we can do these things. Well, this is proof that even when there is smaller rooftop sites that we can tap into, we can aggregate them together and make this community solar aggregation happen. In this case, each of these sites is under 500 kW, which was under the threshold that CAISO wanted or needed at the time. But we still made that happen. This is going to be a complicated slide. I'll just make a point that it took a long time. We envisioned this project in 2020, and it came online in February of 2025, right? So it does take time. It took more than it should have taken. We went through, and Clean Power Alliance is the off-taker, the local CCA for the county. We went through 2 solicitations to be able to successfully, get it approved. The CAISO process was long. The Edison interconnection process was long, but it made it happen, right? And so this is the first time in the state where 2 front-of-the-meter under 500 kW locations are aggregated and are put into service as a new resource in CAISO. So you can see this visual as 2 sites at the project developer level, an agreement as a generator source with the utility. This is the sort of poles and wires utility. And then there is the off-taker agreement, which is in this case the CPA, having custody and responsible for the energy that is created, and then that is then scheduled with CAISO. So perhaps a complicated graphic, more of a complicated process that this actually took. But what we've learned through this is that it's possible, and now we have a roadmap on how to make it happen, right? So I think CAISO understood the value of it. There's a blog or post that they wrote up and shared, as well as LA's article from sort of earned media. I say this because it is notable, and this is for everyone, sort of layman terms, like this is important, right? But I think for us as an industry advocacy group, it's important because this sort of thing can happen many, many times, and we can make that oval that Bill showed. We can create those savings for the communities that we want to and avoid all of this rate-based capital infrastructure and T&D costs that I think is not necessary, right? And so I'll stop sharing my screen, and I think that's my time. I'll pass it back to you, John.
Okay, great presentations. And I'm pleased to introduce our final speaker, Cailey Underhill. She's the Advocacy and Development Director for the Solar Rights Alliance. Her first campaign was working to stop the solar tax. We are thankful for her continuing advocacy and passion, voting for the right to use the energy from the sun. Cailey?
Thanks so much, John. Really appreciate that. First, I just want to check that everybody can hear me. Can you give me a thumbs up? We're nodding. Okay, that's great. So again, thank you, John. Thank you all for having me here today. I'll keep this relatively short, but what I'd like to speak to is a profound red alert threat to rooftop solar across the state of California that is happening now. And I want to begin by perhaps just stating the obvious. I think I know just about everyone on this call, so this is not a surprise to anyone, but I think it bears saying out loud. The reason all of this is so hard is because the monopoly utilities want to undermine rooftop solar, want to end rooftop solar, because it cuts directly against their profit model. They make an 8 to 10% guaranteed profit on every new pole, wire, and piece of energy infrastructure they put on the grid. The more rooftop solar we have, the fewer poles and wires they need, the less money they make. So it's a direct one-to-one-to-one connection. Why all of this is happening. And to get their way, they have created a lie about rooftop solar that they have supercharged with $1 billion over the past 20 years in political giving, in donations to academics, nonprofits, businesses across the state. That's what we're all up against here. And that has taken the form of a bill, AB 942, which began because the governor put out an executive order last year that blamed every rooftop solar user who got their solar before 2023 for rising electricity rates. And everybody here knows that that is just malarkey, that rooftop solar does not cause rates to rise. In fact, rooftop solar across the state of California saved all ratepayers $1.49 billion in 2024. That's the benefit of rooftop solar to the whole grid, even for folks who don't have it yet. Despite that, the governor, having taken $2.5 million from the monopoly utilities and their labor union, put together this executive order, said, I blame rooftop solar users who are on NEM 1 or NEM 2, the first two versions of net metering, and said, regulators, what should we do about this? So the CPUC, all 5 of 5 have been appointed by Newsom, said, Newsom, we agree with you. Here's what you should do. You should slap on a solar tax. You should further cut solar credit. And you should break all of the existing 2 million contracts. Ready, set, go. And there was a huge public outcry. And as a result, much of that has not happened. And the piece of it that has been put into a standalone bill was authored by Assemblymember Lisa Calderon, who worked for Edison for 25 years as an executive before becoming an assembly member, and has taken $190,000 from the monopoly utilities. And her bill, AB 942, would unequivocally break the 2 million rooftop solar contracts and would harm consumers who try to sell their home. So as many of you know, AB 942 began in the assembly, narrowly passed out of the assembly. There's a 41 vote threshold. This passed with 46 votes. So it squeaked out of the assembly. They bent the rules to ram the bill through and vote on it earlier than they should have been able to, got it out of the assembly. Now it heads to the Senate. As it moved through the assembly, it was weakened and tweaked as it went. So it's a weakened version of the initial bill, but it's still very bad, would unequivocally harm tens of thousands of consumers across the state. And I'll just very briefly explain why, what it is that's happening here. So every rooftop solar user under NEM 1 or NEM 2 signs a contract, which I'm holding right here. It's called the interconnection agreement. And I'm showing this to you because the utilities have been saying this doesn't exist, that there's no such thing as a rooftop solar contract. But there is, this is it. You too can print it out. You can see the signatures line on the back. This is a contract. And very clearly in the terms and conditions of this contract, it says in no uncertain terms that rooftop solar systems eligible for the 20-year transition period shall not lose their eligibility if transferred to a new owner, operator, or account. So what that means in black and white language is that these solar systems get to be on NEM 1 or NEM 2 for 20 years, even if the home is sold. And that's really important because it means that the user who invested in rooftop solar to put these panels on their roof, if they sell their home, they get to pass that value on to the buyer. So what AB 942 would do is break that provision of the contract. So problem number one is that it would retroactively break 2 million rooftop solar contracts. That's problem number one. Problem number two is what the impact of breaking that contract would be. And that is a loss of potentially tens of thousands of dollars in lost investment when solar users go to sell their home. And I want to just briefly explain why. So imagine, if you will, someone who pays for their solar system outright. Maybe they do that out of pocket. Maybe they do it by taking funds out of their retirement. After all, of all the rooftop solar users in the state of California, 61% are middle and working class and 52% are people of color. So we're talking everyday folks here. So maybe they pay for their system outright and they go to sell their home. Whatever remains of that investment couldn't be transferred to the next buyer. There's no way they would take that on because the system has less value if the contract is broken. So they'll have to eat whatever remains of that investment. They'll just lose out on whatever remains of what they invested on their roof. In addition, folks who got a loan or a lease would have to pay off that remaining loan or lease when they go to sell their home, whatever's left on it. And that's because the loans and leases in California are priced based on the state's 20-year guarantee. So think about it this way. If a system is guaranteed to be on NEM 1 or NEM 2 for 20 years, the value of that is that every time that system sends extra electrons to the grid, which is a good thing that we should be encouraging because it's what helps keep the cost of the grid low. Every time that system sends electrons, that solar user gets a credit on their bill, about 30 cents per kilowatt hour for all of those kilowatt hours across the course of the year, 30 cents per kilowatt hour-ish. Under a NEM 3 system, what the home would flip to if the contract is broken, it's 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So you have a loan or lease that's priced for a value of 30 cents per kilowatt hour that upon sale flips to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. The debt becomes larger than the savings of the rooftop solar system. And no home buyer in their right mind is going to take on an underwater loan or lease. So that would force the seller of the home to buy out that loan or lease, again, at a loss of potentially tens of thousands of dollars. It is a huge consumer rights issue. And I want to be really clear that there is no amendment that would make this bill acceptable. Across its path through the assembly, it was amended twice. One of the amendments removed schools and farms from the bill, which I think is telling, because if you acknowledge that harm is going to be done to schools and farms, so you take them out, and you're saying you're okay with doing this harm to everybody else. So we've heard there's a potential amendment in the works to take out multifamily homes. Again, I think that initial red flag stands, but let's talk about multifamily homes. So if you look at the folks in multifamily homes who make at or below the median income in California, which is $96,000 for a family for the year. If you look at those folks, this carve out would rescue 100,000 apartments. It would leave in place 600,000 single family homes that are either owned or rented with that same income bracket. So the same group of people who make at or below median income, you'd rescue 100,000, but say you're okay with screwing over 600,000 other homes in that same income bracket. That is not acceptable. There's no amendment to this bill that would make it okay to retroactively break tens of thousands of rooftop solar contracts in the state of California. So I want to say thank you, big thank you to every organization on this call who is part of the coalition to stop AB 942. We're at over 200 organizations thus far. We were recently joined by the Western Center on Law and Poverty, recognizing this impact on low-income folks in California, as well as the California Association of Realtors, who agrees that this is what the impact will be when folks go to sell their home. So again, huge thank you. There's too many groups on here to name them all, but you know who you are, and we really appreciate that. So the next step is to stop this bill in the Senate. We'll have probably 3 opportunities. The first is when this bill comes up in the Senate Energy Committee. We don't know when exactly that will happen, but we believe it will be sometime between July 8th and July 15th. So the thing to do now is to call your state senators and ask them to vote no on AB 942 as amended. And that as amended piece is important because they need to know that it's a solid no on this bill, no matter what. Happy to answer any questions folks might have, but I'll stop there in the interest of time. And again, thank you so much for having me. I know there's a lot going on in this legislative session. This bill is the hard red line that cannot be crossed. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for watching this presentation from the California Alliance for Community Energy. This concludes the published portion of our monthly call. If you would like to participate in our monthly calls, including Q&A, please consider joining the California Alliance for Community Energy. For more information, you can see our website at cacommunityenergy.org/apply.